We're continuing our season in review series, and this time is Jackson State, who exceeded expectations and by far has enough talent returning to have a repeat performance. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, I am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode, we're going to wrap it up with a look at how Jackson State exceeded expectations. In segment 2, we're going to take a look at the rich getting richer. This getting pushed back actually gave us some more material, and the Jackson State Tigers just pulled in an all SWAC player from within the state. But we're going to kick this whole thing off with Jackson State's young core. And I know that this is a season in review, and we're going to highlight some of these players. But the special thing about Jackson State in 2024 is that they're bringing over a lot of those guys into 2025. I think that's scary for the rest of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. That's scary for the rest of the HBCU landscape, because if you're looking at a team that just won a Celebration Bowl, you're probably looking at some pieces leaving. And yes, Jackson State did have some guys who are departing due to graduation. They have some guys who are entering the portal, such as Joshua Nobles. Right, like they do have these players that are leaving, but when you look at some of their core pieces, they're still here. When you look at some of the young players that we're excited about, they are still here. And I'll start it off with the quarterback position. They had 3 starting caliber quarterbacks last season. You had Jacobian Morgan, Zy McDonald, and Cam McCoy. When I originally was going to do this show, all 3 were still here. But in the meantime, you had Zy McDonald, who has entered the transfer portal, which honestly just makes the most sense to me, right? Him making the trip into the portal is the most logical when you look at eligibility. Zy McDonald is in his last year of eligibility, or will be in his last year of eligibility. Why go into a situation where the returning quarterback was the starter last year? Why do that? That doesn't make sense to me. So if I was Zy McDonald, I probably would have departed too, because I was here last year. Morgan was here last year, and I saw who you picked. I came in and I had a great game in the SWAC championship game, but then you went back to Morgan. These are not criticisms or anything, but if you're evaluating situations, you should look at the pros and cons. And if we're looking at that situation for him, the con is Jacobian Morgan. Jacobian Morgan is returning, but for Jackson State, that's a pro. Now I want to look at the 2 quarterbacks that you do have left. Jacobian Morgan and Cam McCoy. This is the beautiful part about it, is that McCoy is a sophomore. So while Morgan is a junior and McDonald was a junior, or is a junior, and they're both going into their senior seasons, you don't have that with Cam McCoy. So Zy McDonald, him leaving made sense, because his expiration date on his eligibility and Jacobian Morgan's expiration date, they line up. So it's directly conflicting, right? But with Cam McCoy, who is a sophomore, technically, if you can keep him on this roster, and I know he's on the baseball team, or I think he might be on the baseball team. I'm not sure. He has it in his header, but I didn't see him on the roster. But either way, I didn't see him in the portal. The point is, if you can keep Cam McCoy on this team in 2025, then you're basically green lighting him to be your quarterback in 2026. The difficulty is right now. The difficulty doesn't come in 2026, because now you can say, hey, well, you sat here, you learned, you've had some starting experience, probably you played a little bit here and there. We want to lean you into being the starting quarterback. Oh, bet. Why would I leave now? I have a leg up on anybody else who's coming in. So if you can keep Cam McCoy this year, you can have a very strong argument that Jackson State will be set at quarterback from 2024 on to 2026. That's a 3-year span where you're going to have a young core and you'll have a quarterback who can work with them, who's been in the system for a while. That is a huge positive for Jackson State. But it doesn't just stop at the quarterback position. That's just one room, right? Because you had arguably the best quarterback room in HBCU football. I don't know if that's arguable, but you still have two. So you're happy about that. But it doesn't stop there. You're looking at the running threat. A lot of people would say, well, Irv Mulligan is gone. That's true. Irv Mulligan is gone, but then you bring in freshman sensation. I'm talking about freshman All-American, second team All-SWAC or first team All-SWAC. This is an all-conference All-American player that's going to be replacing Irv Mulligan and Travis Terrell. So when you bring Travis Terrell in, he's not just a kick returner. He's not. But if you want to look at the frame, I think this is the beautiful part. Let's say you're losing Irv Mulligan. Well, Travis Terrell's not that big. Okay, well, I'm just going to use Emari Matthews then. Like, that's the thing. You are losing the best running back in black college football. That's going to be a hit. That is going to leave a dent. But at the same time, I have a freshman sensation that I have a lot of hopes for. And then I have Emari Matthews, who's a little bit bigger. So if you want to say I'm losing Irv Mulligan and I don't have anybody who's going to be that complete package, okay, I'm going to have Matthews for the boom and I'm going to have Terrell for the zoom. How about that? And I'm getting that out of two players instead of one. And one could argue that the fatigue is even less of a factor now that I'm splitting carries between those two at probably a greater degree. There you have it on running back. You're still returning talent. On the wide receiver side, you're still bringing in Jonas Fortillion. You're still bringing in Isaiah Spencer. They're still coming back. These are your two leading receivers. And they're coming back with their quarterback. So on the offensive side of the ball, from a skill position perspective, you're bringing in an all-conference player. You're bringing back an all-conference player who's going to step into a larger role. You're bringing back your second-team all-SWAC quarterback. You're bringing in your two leading receivers. They're returning as well. You have so much talent returning. That's a great thing, but we're not done. It's not just offense. It's also on the defensive side of the ball. So you're losing somebody like Joshua Nobles. I'll give you that. You're losing Jeremiah Williams, who is a third-team All-American as well. Or excuse me, Joshua Williams, a third-team All-American, is coming back. You're not losing him as well. So you're getting some losses on the edge. You're not just losing Nobles on the edge. You're losing some players on the outside. But do you think that Phillip Webb could take that step up? The former LSU player, the transfer from the SEC. Do you think that he's able to take that step up with more reps? Maybe he can get some more sacks to the quarterback a little bit more. I think that these things are plausible. I don't think that's crazy, but I won't make that a large part of my argument because that's a little bit more speculative. Let's focus on players who had a bigger role returning, or at least were a prominent factor. I know Terrell is stepping into a bigger role, but he was a prominent factor in that offense, and it's only going to grow. I love the Pulliam-Ashton Taylor duo at linebacker. They're returning. I love what Jeremiah Williams was able to do. He's returning. And one place that they are lacking is defensive back. That's the one place where you're going to lose talent, whether that's the graduation or the portal. That is the one place, and you're going to have to reload with guys who are younger, who's going to have to step in and fill those shoes. You're going to have to step in and probably hit the portal. You're going to have to come in with some, I don't know what the plan is for them exactly, but you're losing a Robert McDaniel, you're losing a Guthrie, like you're losing some players. So on the defensive side of the ball, two levels, you're bringing back a lot of players. On one level, you're not. That doesn't mean you're not going to be talented, though. Those could easily have young players who are going to step into a larger role and fulfill everything that you need. So this is scary for the SWAC. A team that really ran through the conference is returning so many critical pieces. You should be alarmed. The great Scarface once asked a question. He said, guess who's Bizak? It was a phenomenal song with Beanie and Jay-Z. If you ask that question to Jackson State, it's doggone nearly everybody. Honestly. And that's concerning. That's concerning. But you know what? It doesn't stop with who's coming back. How about who are they getting? Because the rich gets richer. Mississippi Valley State all-conference wide receiver Nathan Rembert is coming to Jackson State. As if they didn't have enough weapons already. Let's break it down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Prayers up to my people in Louisiana, of course, in New Orleans. Um, if you want to put some money down on the Pelicans, I wore my Pelican shirt, and I was like, oh, dang, I woke up seeing the news. Wow. But put some money on the Pelicans. Put some money on the Saints this weekend going into the season finale. If you want to put some money down on, they have a Pittsburgh versus Bengals game this weekend. I think it's going to be really good, and it's on Saturday. The college football playoffs were going on. If you're listening to this right now, you can check out the Sugar Bowl that had to be postponed. It's a lot of different things, a lot of different avenues and opportunities for you. This is the end of the NFL season, but NBA is just kicking off. The NFL regular season, but the NBA is just kicking off. Doesn't matter if you want to go with the over for a player, under for the steals, everything and in between is there. You just go to FanDuel.com. You go to FanDuel.com, and if you're new to FanDuel, you get $250 back in bonus bets when you put down a winning $5 bet. Just go to FanDuel.com and make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Oregon versus Ohio State was yesterday. Check out Locked On SEC. University of Texas pulled off a really close game against Arizona State. Check out Locked On Big 12 because they also had a game, Arizona State was in that game more than we thought that they would be. Now let's keep pushing forward as we review the season of Jackson State. The rich gets richer. And, I was supposed to do this when Deshaun Jackson got hired. So that's about a week ago at this point. I'm getting more and more material every day. Early on Wednesday afternoon, I would say. It was either Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon. You get the news that Mississippi Valley State all-conference wide receiver Nathan Rembert is now going to shift to Jackson State. He's staying in the state of Mississippi, but he's leaving the Delta Devils for the Tigers. This is a huge move, man. You ever see when folks who are famous or rich or whatever, they get things for free and the people just want, hey, we just want to see you in it so that we can spread the word. That's what this feels like. Because when you got that cachet, then people just want to give you stuff. They flock towards you. And the way that applies to college athletics is that when you're successful, people just flock. You do all of this work to show you're a good recruiter to bring in talent, to show you're a good coach to scheme up the talent. And once you see your profits, you ain't the only one who has eyes on it. So once you've seen your profits, they've seen your profits, and now they just flocking towards you, and the job becomes so much easier. You don't have to convince people. You just have to confirm beliefs. And that's what it's like for Jackson State. You bring in Nathan Rembert, the second leading receiver in the conference in 2024, coming over from Mississippi Valley State. You already have some dogs in your wide receiving core. It's funny. We talk about South Carolina State. We talked about the Caden Hyde, Ionaj Carter, Justin Smith Brown, excuse me. We talk about all three of those players and how it's not often that teams have three guys who can be real lead wide receivers. Well, look at you now. You got Jonas Fertillion. You got Isaiah Spencer. You had those two players last year, and you felt really good about both of them. They were both really talented players. But now you bring in Nathan Rembert, the guy with second most yards, only one or two players to go over 1,000 yards in 2024. The rich gets richer. It's funny to me that Mississippi Valley State and UAPB had the two best wide receivers in the SWAC last year. That's funny to me because they haven't been on the greatest trajectory. Granted, UAPB was on a much better trajectory, or is on a much better one than Mississippi Valley State. I don't know if that's going to be enough for Coach Hampton. I know this isn't the conversation right now, but we need wins at the same time, right? So, like, if you look beyond the scoreboard, it's a conversation. But when you look at the scoreboard, I got 12 of them. I got 12 of them in front of me. They ain't been going your way. So I actually hope that he gets it together because I do see a better product on the field from UAPB. They just need to win. They just need to win, right? And I thought they were much more competitive this year. Anyway, where was I at? Oh, so you have your three. Offense was the calling card of Jackson State. They did everything, but when you're the best offense in the conference, that's going to outweigh. Even if you're the best offense and defense, that's going to outweigh. So now let's look at the 3 wide receivers you have. And I was comparing them to that South Carolina State trio, which is interesting. One of the greatest thing about South Carolina State is that they had 3 wide receivers who you knew could be deadly at any moment. That's not something that most people have the luxury of having. Now Jackson State's going to have that because they're going to have Nathan Rembert, Isaiah Spencer, and Jonas Fortillion. Let's go over their 2024 production and how I think it'll change in 2025. So Fortillion had 41 catches for 627 yards and 11 touchdowns. Isaiah Spencer had 35 catches for 660 yards and 4 touchdowns. Then Nathan Rembert had 70 catches for 1,038 yards and 4 touchdowns. What do you naturally see as the difference? Right? There's 2 things. One, Rembert has way more catches and he has way more yards. I think both of those are going to come down because when you're in a receiving core with other wide receivers, they're going to take some of those targets. Yeah, Fortillion could have got probably an extra 20 targets and probably an extra 250 or so yards. He could have done that. But at the same time, you had Isaiah Spencer there. Now you have Spencer, Fortillion, and Rembert. I don't think any of these guys are going to get to 60, 70 catches. But the other thing I see is Fortillion had 11 touchdowns. I expect that to continue. I expect him to be a red zone threat. Rembert adds a lot of explosiveness, right? He's a really explosive wide receiver. You've seen him line up in the backfield and catch passes before. But when you're looking at Jonas Fortillion, Isaiah Spencer, and Nathan Rembert, I'm looking at a triumvirate of receivers who were very successful last year, but that success showed up in different ways. Fortillion was a phenomenal red zone threat. He was a magnet for the football when you got there and you needed a touchdown. Meanwhile, Rembert, he was 1,038 yards. So he's all over racking up yardage. Spencer was equally as explosive for Jackson State, right? He had 35 catches for 660 yards. When they're all 3 together, Fortillion is the one that's most likely to retain his role. Rembert may step in and be the lead receiver, but those numbers are going to drop because he's sharing the ball with 2 other guys. I can't wait to watch them. We have to look at it from a actual game standpoint as opposed to a stat standpoint. And what I mean by that is what leads to winning, not what leads to numbers. That's the difference. So when you're looking at Rembert, I don't know if he hits the century mark again because he's sharing the football with quality wide receivers. But those 1,038 yards led to how many victories for Mississippi Valley State? Meanwhile, his 800 yards may lead to way more victories for Jackson State. That's the point that I want to make, and that's the way I think we have to look at this edition. Sheesh. But you're talking about exceeding expectations. Jackson State, I'm not going to say was counted out. I'm not going to say that we thought that they were going to be just poochies or anything like that. I would say that we didn't expect them to be as great as they were. So let's break down how they exceeded these expectations as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. I'm looking at Raw right now, January 20th. I'm trying to be present, American Airlines Center. And I only looked at one place, and that is GameTime, because I know they have the best prices. And as I was looking on there, I was reminded of my favorite thing about GameTime. And my favorite thing about GameTime is the all-in pricing. I hate when I go see $50 tickets that turn into 67. Those are so irritating because I didn't sign up for the $67 ticket. But all of a sudden I got this fee and that fee and this fee and that fee. None of that applies when you're talking about GameTime. All-in prices allows you to see exactly what they're going to charge you, minus the tax, of course. But still, you get the exact image, or excuse me, the exact price that you're going to pay. I love seeing the image of where I'm going to sit. I love seeing that too, because I want to know the exact view that I'm going to have. GameTime allows me to step in and be the most comfortable because I know everything that I'm getting into before I even get to checkout. How am I going to see this product and how much is this going to cost me? It's the most impressive thing about the app. Download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. So go ahead and do that today. As we're wrapping up today's episode, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Yeah, can't see the Duchess. Shout out to the lady. She bought me this watch. I'm going to show it off every chance that I get. Anyway, that being said, Jackson State wanted to show off everything that they had, any chance they could get, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, because the expectations for Jackson State versus what they actually did, they did not line up, and I would argue A lot of that had to do with the offense. Did people expect Irv Mulligan to come in and just go absolutely ballistic? I don't know. I don't know if people expected Irv Mulligan to come in and be the best running back in black college football. Probably not. I liked him. I ain't gonna lie. I thought he was a really good player his first year at JSU. I wasn't looking for that. In a way, Irv Mulligan is a microcosm of Jackson State as a team. People thought Jackson State would be all right. Like, I think they thought they would be a solid squad. Did they think they would come through and run through the conference? Absolutely not. Just like Irv Mulligan. We thought he'd be good. Oh, that's a solid back. Did we think he'd come in and dominate the way he did? Absolutely not. So I think that actually kind of aligned. It's funny. And who was the engine for Jackson State? Irv Mulligan. It all lines up. But let me read to you the preseason polls. It's no disrespect. Of course, different people are going to find different things disrespectful, but to me, where they ranked Jackson State coming into the year should not been viewed as disrespect. You probably thought they were underestimating you, but not disrespect. In the SWAC East, Alabama State was voted to be first, overwhelmingly, 11 first place votes. FAMU was second, and it wasn't that far. So it was only like a 10-point gap between those two teams. Then you drop down to Jackson State, and Jackson State is at 87 points. They're closer to Alabama A&M at 4 than they were FAMU at 2. They're 17 points behind FAMU, but they're only 11 points ahead of Alabama A&M. And that's where I want to stop, because who cares where the other two teams were. Jackson State was 3, which, okay, cool. Everybody can't be spot on. But how many first place votes you think did Jackson State get? Jackson State had 2 first place votes. Jackson State had less first place votes than Alabama A&M coming into the season. So yes, they exceeded expectations. I would say by far, because not enough people believed in them. Maybe they all thought it was a solid third place for them, but nobody believed in them to go above and beyond. And that's exactly what they did. If you did expect them to do it, yeah, you probably didn't think that they'd be scoring 30 points every single game. I want to look at Jackson State's football team and check out just how many close games that they had. How many games did they score less than 30 points? So you go through it. You can probably count on one hand how many games was close. We're only going to go SWAC. We're going to leave out Lane. We're going to leave out ULM. Beat Southern 33-15. Trust me, they controlled that game better than an 18-point win. They lost to Grambling 20-41. There was a lot of turnovers in that. That offense was better than 20 points. Jackson State versus Texas Southern 43-14. Alabama A&M 45-38. That was a late push by Alabama A&M that got that game to be close. I would still say they dominated it. I would say that they controlled at least and maybe dominated the FAMU game. The Bethune-Cookman game dominated, even though it was a slow start for them in the first half with the new quarterback that the Wildcats put in. I can't talk today. Excuse me. Alabama or Arkansas Pine Bluff 41-3. Mississippi Valley 51-14. Alabama State was the only close game. And you tell any Jackson State fan, they'll tell you, look at all the mistakes that we made. But I'm gonna say that was a close one. That was a real dogfight. Alabama State versus Jackson State was a real dogfight. Maybe you could throw FAMU in there too. Maybe. Because that was a close game that Jackson State pulled away with at the end. So, yeah, you're looking at 2 games. Alcorn State, 48-10. Southern the second time, 41-13. South Carolina State, 28-7. So that's 1 game against HBCUs, 2 games against HBCUs, 3 games against HBCUs in which they didn't score 30 points. 3 games. And the other one was against ULM. 1 game within a single score. The only Jackson State game that was a single score game was their matchup against Alabama State. This is what I'm saying. There's people who believed in Jackson State. Not many did it publicly. Not many were willing to just say they're going to be the best team in this conference, let alone their division, right? They didn't even say that. But people did believe in them. But I struggle to find somebody who thought they would be as dominant as they were. All the way down to the Celebration Bowl. Jackson State outclassed South Carolina State. 21 points wasn't enough to really display and showcase how much better the Tigers were than the Bulldogs on that first weekend in December. It just wasn't. Jackson State exceeded expectations by a high degree. So I want to go ahead and pat them on the back and give them some love for that. Tomorrow, I'm going to look at something else Jackson State related again, because I know we're looking at JSU football and their season in review, but I seen a real interesting story. And this is about all of Jackson State athletics. We have to give a round of applause to just how consistent that their teams have been across the board. We don't do that enough, but we will do it on Friday. I guess it's kind of like our feature Friday. We haven't done that in a long time, but we may bring that back, seeing that football season is over and we're no longer doing game of the week. So what y'all want to see on Feature Friday? Who you want to see on the show? Let me know all of those things. You already know where to find me. Do it in the comments. You can text me on Twitter. You can tweet me on Twitter. You can DM me on Twitter. Find me on Instagram at @_ Mouth of the South. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, which will be tomorrow, 6:30, be there or I'm so lame. Anyway, y'all be there tomorrow, guys. We leaving the corny stuff in 2024. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.